Friends, for quick revision, breathing and exchange of the gases will be discussed. So here are some of the main highlights point: respiratory organs, mechanism breathing, exchange of gases, transport of gases, regulation of respiration and disorders of respiratory system. These are the six major points or subdivisions added in this lesson. So here first paragraph giving the idea on the oxygen utilized by the organisms that will be utilized for the breakdown of the simple molecules like glucose, amino acids and fatty acids, and derive energy to perform various activities purpose. And the CO2 also harmful to the body, so that's why while catabolic process time that CO2 has been releasing. So here metabolism nothing but included anabolism and the catabolism process. Anabolism means synthesizing of the new molecules from the simpler one, and the catabolic process in which that large molecule can break down into simpler one and the energy will be releasing. In the anabolic process, generally that ATP has been required. The catabolic process ATP will be releasing. So in these cases, the oxygen has to be continuously provided to the cell, so that cell is required the oxygen and to survive properly. And in the each cell glycolysis, tracer cycle and electron transmission has been taking place for the providing of energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate. And here in this case, breathing and exchanging of the gases, the process of exchanging of oxygen from the atmosphere to with the CO2 produced by the called the breathing, and commonly we are calling respiration. So in this chapter, the exchanging of the gases taking place, inhaling and exchanging of after inhaling, the gases will be passing through the alveoli area. Alveoli is the main exchanging of the material oxygen as well as the CO2, and inhaling and expiration. So inspiration as well as the expiration, these two factors influencing main parameters. In this next paragraph, respiratory organs. So based upon the type of animals, whether it is the different groups of animals, mainly that habitat and levels of organization based, the utilization of the organs, respiratory organs have been different from the animals to animals. In the case of lower invertebrates, the like example the sponges, cylindroids, flatworms, the exchanging of the oxygen as well as with the CO2 by simple diffusion process. So there is no proper development of the organs, respiratory organs in the case of lower invertebrates. That's why in the case of sponges, cylindroids and flatworms, only exchange of the gases, oxygen and CO2 by simple diffusion process entire body surface. So whereas in the case of earthworm, let us take example, much cuticle is there. And in the case of insects, a network of tubes, we are calling the tracheal tubes. So that will be also very important for the NEET point of view. You need to remember. And the special vascularized structure called gills also there. Another name we may call it as bronchial respiration. That will be generally we are observing aquatic arthropods and molluscs. And whereas vascularized bags called lungs, that is another name, pulmonary respiration, are used by the terrestrial forms of the exchange of the gases. And in the among vertebrate fishes use gills, whereas amphibians, reptile, birds, mammals respire through lungs. So amphibians like frogs can respire through their moisture skin. So in this paragraph, we need to remember different kinds of animals and how they are performing the respiration. So their names and examples we need to focus for the competitive exam like NEET, and it will be helpful for the Cbse board exam also. And human respiratory system. So here that main parts in this area, the pharynx, tracheo, sound box, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli is there. So before that, just to see the diagram for understanding purpose, this will be the basic diagram of the human respiratory system, and the sectional view of the left lungs is also shown. So epiglottis is there, afterwards larynx, afterwards it has been passing through the tracheo, afterwards bronchus, bronchioles, and finally reached to alveoli. That alveoli area, most important part, structural and functional unit of lungs, where exchanging of the gas is taking place. So in this structure, the human respiratory system, and the lungs, whatever present in lungs outside the pleural membrane wrapped around that, and within that pleural fluid also there, and alveoli is mainly exchanging of the gases taking place. So here that main parts what are that included in this human respiratory system are, and a chambers open into the pharynx, and commonly passage of the food and the air. So commonly it will be passing through the pharynx of the food as well as the air. So that is also important for the NEET. And larynx region into tracheo, that larynx is a cartilaginous box. That will be important, we need to remember, which help in the sound production. That's why we are calling loud sound box. And then one more important point, the cartilaginous flap also there is epiglottis to prevent the entry of the food into the larynx. So epiglottis, it is a cartilaginous flap we are calling, that will be prevent entry of food into the larynx. And the mid thoracic cavity area also, fifth thoracic vertebrae into right and left primary bronchi, and undergo further that bronchus divisions into secondary and tertiary bronchis. The bronchioles ending up in very thin terminal bronchioles, and the tracheoprimary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi and initial bronchioles are separated by the incomplete cartilaginous rings. And whereas here the alveoli, so that will be each terminal bronchiole give rise to a number of very thin, irregular, walled and vascular bag-like structure called alveoli. So the where the exchange of the gas is taking place after inhaling the gas, and through that alveoli area, that blood inside that RBC playing major role inside that hemoglobin. So in the blood, hemoglobin also playing a major role. It is acting as a transporter protein in the quaternary structure, and many more parameters also influencing upon that exchanging time from the lungs to the tissue and the tissue to the lungs, and it will become lateral. And that branch network of the bronchi, bronchioles, and the alveoli comprises the lungs. And it will be that lung areas, whatever which has been covered by the double-layered pleura. That pleura is very, very important, and within that pleural fluid also there. So that lung surface, the outer pleural membrane is close contact with the thoracic area. So that will be attached to the outer surface thoracic lungs area, and inner pleural membrane is contact with the lungs surface, and external nostril also there, that will be terminal bronchioles, and the alveoli they duct from the respiratory exchange of the part of the respiratory system. And another important point here is the exchange of the port site of the actual diffusion oxygen and CO2 between the blood and respiratory air. That in this area the lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber area. Thoracic chamber we need to remember, and thoracic chamber formed dorsally by the vertebral column, ventral by the sternum, lateral by the ribs, and on lower side by the dome-shaped diaphragm. So these four different areas where it has been attaching the total respiratory system also we need to remember. So here respiratory involves, what are the steps involved in that? The breathing, inhaling of the gases, afterwards transferring through the alveolar area, afterwards diffusion across the alveolar membrane, transport of the gases by the blood, afterward diffusion of oxygen and CO2 between the blood and tissues, and utilization of oxygen by the cells, afterwards catalytic reactions, afterwards releasing of CO2, afterwards once again CO2 will be going from the tissue towards the lungs area. So these are the main important following steps involved in the respiration process. And mechanism of the breathing, so here inspiration and expiration, these two mechanisms playing a major role in the mechanism of the breathing. And if you want to understand all this total paragraph, we just go through that a very simple way. This is the one diagram, and this is the another diagram, and these two diagrams mechanism of breathing showing the inspiration and expiration. So here inspiration time, so whatever that human beings inhaling time of the gas, what happening here inside of that whatever the pod respiratory system area, breathing area. So inspiration time, you see that here what are the changes after entering the lungs area, volume of thorax increased, and afterwards ribs and sternum raised, rib cage also has been changing inside of the space, diaphragm contracted. So these are the main parameter inspiration time of the gas, while expiration time, that gas volume of thorax decreased, ribs and sternum returned to the original position, and diaphragm relaxed and arcuate upwards. These are the important points, inspiration and expiration time of the gases and the respiratory system of the human being. So that will be based, we need to remember. So inspiration, expiration, and then intrapulmonary pressure also we need to focus, and less than that atmosphere pressure, based upon that it will be going. Inspiration can occur if the pressure within the lungs is less than the atmospheric air. There is a negative pressure in the lungs with respect to the atmospheric pressure. And similarly expiration takes place within the intrapulmonary pressure is higher than the atmospheric pressure. So the diaphragm and its specialized set of muscles and external and internal intercostal between the ribs, help in the generation of such gradients. So these pressures also we need to remember. And here what are the important points in the sternum area causing increase the volume of the thoracic chamber, also dorsoventral area, and also whatever that influencing that air increase the pulmonary volume, decrease the interpulmonary pressure to less than the atmospheric pressure. So just write that pressure, and at the same time how much of pressure is there outside of the environment and inside of the lungs area. We need to focus these two pressures along with that thoracic, and whatever the thorax increased ribs, sternum area, rib cage, and the diaphragm, whether it is contracting and relaxing based upon the inhaling and expiration of the gases. And next this leads to increase in the intrapulmonary pressure slightly above. And next we need to focus on the average healthy man. And next to that an average healthy human breathe 12 to 16 times per minute. That is also we need to remember, 12 to 16 times per minute breathing taking place, the normal human beings. And also here next here is respiratory volumes and capacity is very important for the competitive exams as well as the Cbse board also. The tidal volume nothing but the how much of air inspired or expired during the normal respiration. So here 2 points we need to remember, either the volume, how much of volume we are inspiring or else expired during the normal respiration process. So approximately 500 milliliters, and that will be if we are calculating based upon that how many times we need to breathe. Generally you see that here 12 to 16 times, if you are multiplying that, we will get approximate value of 6000 to 8000 milliliter of air per minute. And IRV nothing but inspiratory residual volume. So inspiratory reserve volume, reserve means inside of that lungs area how much of inspired air is there, additional volume of air. So a person can inspire by forceful inspiration. So it is possible only forceful inspiration time only additional volume chances are there to retain in the lungs area. That value 2500 to 3000 milliliters. Expired reservoir, additional volume of air a person can expire forcefully. Forcefully we need to expire. So based upon that average value is 1000 ml to 1100 ml. So next to residual volume. So here also volume of air remaining in the lungs even after forceful expiration. So that point we need to remember, that average value 1100 to 1200 ml. And next to inspiratory capacity, total volume of air a person can inspire after a normal expiration. Normal expiration process. Total how much volume air person can inspire after a normal expiration. So that will be include TV plus IRV. And expiratory capacity included nothing but the total volume of air person can expire after a normal inspiration. That will include TV plus ERV. And functional residual capacity nothing but volume of air that will remain in the lungs after a normal expiration. That will include ERV plus RV. And as well as that vital capacity, the maximum volume of air person can breathe in the after forced expiration. That will be include ERV, TV, and IRV. Or else another defines the maximum volume of air person can breathe out after forced inspiration. The last one, total lungs capacity, that air accommodated in the lungs at the end of the forced inspiration. That will include RV, ERV, TV, and IRV. Or else vital capacity plus residual volume, if we are combining, you will get the total lungs capacity. And here exchange of the gases also we need to remember. And here the generally how much of partial oxygen and partial pressure is there inside and outside of the environment, as well as at the same time. So this table will be given that overall idea of that how the respiratory gases partial pressure in the oxygen and carbon dioxide at different parts involved in the diffusion in the comparison to those in atmosphere. So respiratory gas, we see that oxygen in the atmosphere air 159 mmHg is there, alveolar air 104 millimeter of mercury is there. And blood deoxygenated blood mmHg 40, and blood oxygenated 95 mmHg is there. Tissue area the 40 mmHg is there. CO2 0.3 in atmosphere air, alveolar area 40 and blood 45, and blood oxygenated 40 and tissue 45 mmHg is there. So just so based upon that, while incoming inhalation time, oxygen pressure will be, oxygen percentage will be more, and while going time after catabolic pathways at the tissue level, after finishing that CO2 level, obviously it will be more if compared with the oxygen. So here the inhalation time and expiration time, that gases, the percentage of the oxygen as well as the CO2, we need to remember. So based upon that, we can guess the answer in the competitive exam. You see that in that diagram, expired air or inspired air. After inspiring the air into the alveolar area, partial oxygen 104 mmHg is there, partial CO2 very less is there, 40 mmHg. After alveolus, exchanging of the gases taking place in the lungs area. Afterwards, oxygen will be entering through the pulmonary vein, afterwards through the heart and systemic arteries area, and at the time that partial oxygen will be 95 mmHg, partial carbon dioxide 40 mmHg, while pulmonary vein towards the systemic arteries traveling time from the lungs towards the through the heart towards the various body parts, that partial oxygen will be more if compared with the partial carbon dioxide. And at the same time, in the catabolic pathways, after finishing that, CO2 will be generating in the body tissue area. Outwards, you just left side, you go through that systemic vein. They are carrying deoxygenated blood, partial oxygen 40 mmHg, partial carbon dioxide 45 mmHg is there. Afterwards, it will be traveling through the pulmonary arteries, through the heart towards the pulmonary arteries and towards the reach the lungs area, and it will be going out expiring. So all these exchange of the gases look like a double circulation. We have been calling oxygenated as well as the deoxygenated blood, so that's why we're calling a double circulation also. And here the right side, partial oxygen always more in the oxygenated condition. After catabolic pathways in the left side, the partial oxygen will always be less than the partial carbon dioxide. And next here that exchanging of the time, what are the main points we need to remember. So here that the solubility of the CO2 is 20 to 25% time higher than that of oxygen, the amount of CO2 that they can diffuse through the diffusion membrane. And three major layers we have been observed in the diagram. In the alveolar area, basement membrane is there, endothelium of the blood capillaries, as well as that it has been wrapped, that blood capillaries also inside RBC also there are blood cells, and blood capillaries also there is squamous epithelium of alveoli wall also. It is one celled thickness is there, it's very thin, and alveoli cavity area very sensitive area. There are three major layers, the thin squamous epithelium of alveoli, the endothelium of the alveoli capillaries, and basement substances. So these three areas we need to remember while exchanging time of the gases. And also next coming to this area, transport of the gases, here important points here is how much of transport of the gases transporting from the lungs to the tissue and the tissue to the lungs. Here about 97% of oxygen transported by the RBC in the blood, and remaining 3% of oxygen is carried out in the dissolved state through the plasma. So next, nearly 20 to 25% of the CO2 transported by the RBC. So whereas 70% of that is carried as bicarbonate, about 7% of the CO2 is carried out dissolved state through the plasma. So in these areas, what is the percentage? Obviously asking in the competitive exam in the NEET is how much a percentage transporting oxygen, in which form transporting, and how much a percentage carbon dioxide also, like that. Some of the chances are then the competitive exam like NEET and the transport of oxygen. So here that transport of oxygen. So you just see that graph, the partial pressure of oxygen on the x-axis mmHg, and the percentage of saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. Generally hemoglobin is a quaternary structure. It will be playing a major role to transport of the oxygen from the lungs to the tissue area, and the tissue to lungs area, vice versa. That quaternary structure, that saturation taking place, and based upon that plenty of oxygen, so that will be binding. If it is an unfortunately any polluted area, carbon monoxide is there, it may be also occupying because of the more affinity to compare with the oxygen towards the hemoglobin. So that's why obviously headache and other irritation may also happening in the polluted zone area because of all this picking up of the what type of molecules by the hemoglobin at the lungs area. So that will be depending. Here in this curve area, most probably we need to focus on the binding of oxygen with the hemoglobin is a primary related to partial pressure of oxygen, as well as that whatever that partial pressure of CO2, as well as hydrogen ion concentration, and temperature, or the other factors which can interfere with the binding. So these are the factors influencing upon the binding of that saturation with the hemoglobin of the oxygen. A sigmoid curve, this is the shape of the curve, is sigmoid curve, and hemoglobin with the oxygen is plotted against the partial oxygen. The curve is called the oxygen dissociation curve we are calling, and it will be very highly useful in the studying the effect of factors like partial CO2 concentration as well as H+ concentration and binding of the oxygen with the hemoglobin. In the alveolar area, and where there is a high partial oxygen, this is very important for the competitive exam. In the alveolar area, there is a high partial oxygen, low partial carbon dioxide, less H+ concentration. and lower temperature. These four factors we need to remember the alveoli area. The factors are all favorable for the formation of the oxyhemoglobin. And whereas in the tissue area, low partial oxygen, high partial CO2, high H plus concentration, and high temperature. This is the happening in the tissue area. So these factors we need to remember that what are the factors influencing upon the oxyhemoglobin, and in the tissue area also formation of the CO2 to pick up very easily. And next, every 100 ml of oxygen added blood can deliver around 5 ml of oxygen to the tissue under normal physiological condition. So next, transport of the carbon dioxide. In which form the carbon dioxide transporting after catabolic pathways after finishing the tissue level, that is carbaminohemoglobin 20 to 25%, and the binding that will be related to the partial pressure of CO2, that will be playing major role. Partial CO2 is high and partial oxygen is low in the tissue area, so more binding of the carbon dioxide occur, whereas then partial CO2 is low and partial oxygen is high in the alveoli area. It is exactly opposite. So we need to remember that, observe what is the partial pressure of oxygen as well as the CO2 in the tissue area as well as the lungs area. And also here one important equation also there, CO2 combined with H2O and carbonic hydrolysis enzyme playing a major role. That will be reversible reaction, H2SO3 forming, and once again carbonic anhydride reaction, it will convert to CO3 minus plus H plus. So this will be the concentrated generally in the form of the bicarbonates that has been transporting by, and at the same time the carbonic anhydride is playing a major role. That is CO2 which is bound in the to hemoglobin from the tissue area delivered at the alveoli, and RBC contain a very high concentration of the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, and binded quantity of the same is present in the plasma too. This enzyme facilitates the Pauling reaction. The both directions we can facilitate, we can observe here. The tissue, the site where partial pressure of CO2 is high due to the catabolism, CO2 diffuses into the blood and forms a CO3, and the ionic format is placed at the alveoli site area. Partial CO2 is very low. The reaction proceeds in the opposite direction also, and every 100 ml of deoxygenated blood deliver approximately 4 ml of CO2 to the alveoli. This is also very important for competitive exam. So regulation point of view also, how to regulate the body, the respiration. So here the neural system also influencing, and especially medulla region also in the brain. In that respiratory rhythm center is there, that will be responsible for the regulation. Another pons region also there in the in the brain, and that will be called Pneumotoxic Center. So in that brain, two centers areas we need to observe, that is respiratory rhythm center area and Pneumotoxic Center area, whatever present in the brain, and can moderate the functions of the respiratory rhythm center. And the chemosensitivity areas also in the rhythm center area, which will be highly sensitive to CO2 and hydrogen ions. These two factors influencing increase these substances can activate this center, which in turn can signal the rhythm center to make necessary adjustment in the respiratory process by which these substances can be eliminated. So another respirator associated with aortic arc also there, carotid artery also can recognize changes in the CO2 and H plus concentration and send necessary signals to the rhythm center for remedial action. So the role of oxygen and the regulation of the respiratory system is quite insignificant. And disorders, finally we need to go asthma. It is the difficult breathing due to inflammation of the bronchi and bronchioles. So these are the units, whatever subunits in that lungs area, bronchi, bronchioles, and the alveoli area, main exchange of the gases taking place. In this area, if any problem is there, there will be and wheezing and breathing difficulties, so that will be leads to asthma. And emphysema, it is a chronic disorder, alveoli walls damaged, and that will be due to respiratory surface has been decreased whenever the walls damaged, and that will be generally cigarette smoking, because of the fumes has been depositing every day. Whomever is smoking more and more, that has been depositing, and alveoli area automatically damaged and unable to exchange of the gases taking place. And last one is the occupational respiratory disorders, in this especially industrial area, whomever working in the grinding and stone breaking area. So generally small particles has been inhaling time, that will be entered in that gives rise to inflammation leading to fibrosis and proliferation of the fibrous tissues that can cause serious lung damage. And workers in that industry area should wear protective masks. All these important points that we have been discussed successfully, the breathing and exchanging of the gases. This will be helpful for the quick revision in the examination time for the competitive exams as well as the CBSE also. All the best.